So we came up with the name GG Store 24. It's a little bit more specific. So by now, I feel like the 24 thing in the name is a good thing, actually.
Well, and it also rhymes. So it has some alliteration to it. So it has a nice ring to it. Digistore 24. You know, anything that has that kind of music to the sound of it makes it easy to remember, or easier to remember. In branding and design, I talk about the 3 R's a lot. The 3 R's are being recognized, being remembered, and being revered. In order to be recognized, you have to be visible and you have to show up a lot. And if you show up a lot and consistently enough, then you're remembered. And then if you deliver a great product or service experience, you develop that brand affinity and you're revered by your customers. And so naming is very important when it comes to branding. We do want to have a memorable aspect to it.
How did you get into this?
Well, the funny thing is, Sven, just like you, I have my degree in something completely different. I have a master's degree in painting. And so I started off as a fine artist, teaching painting and drawing. I found that it was very difficult to make a living. So I started putting some of my fine art on t-shirts and selling it. I had my own t-shirt company for about a year, and then I went to work for one of my competitors and realized that I loved seeing my work walking around on people's chests. And I also realized that being a creative director was a lot like being a teacher, except you made a lot more money.
As a serial entrepreneur, I'm always trying to evolve. Having great conversations with other high performers is one of the best ways to grow. Not only in business, but also in spirit, health, and relationships. This is Svencast. Listen, grow, repeat. We're alive with Philip VanDusen. 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 Welcome, Philip. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me on, Sven. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So you are a designer, a creative director, a marketer, and a strategic brand developer. You're the founder of Verhal Brand Design, which means story brand design, right? And
that's right.
For over 20 years, you've helped Fortune 100 companies and entrepreneurs establishing their brands. That's pretty amazing. So I'm curious, how did you get into this?
Well, the funny thing is, Sven, just like you, I have my degree in something completely different. I have a master's degree in painting. And so I started off as a fine artist, teaching painting and drawing at university. And I found that it was very difficult to make a living and to get work at that period of time. So I started putting some of my fine art on t-shirts and selling it around the island of Manhattan. And this was just about the dawn of the computer age, and I started getting into the Macintosh. And so I had my own t-shirt company for about a year, and then I went to work for one of my competitors and realized that I loved seeing my work walking around on people's chests. And I also realized that being a creative director was a lot like being a teacher, except you made a lot more money and you weren't out of work every 9 months. So it was, and that's where I started my career. I went into the fashion industry and worked my way up through a series of companies and was in the fashion industry for about 15 years before I went into the agency side.
Oh, that's very interesting. So, like being in the fashion industry, what's that like? Like, is it like, as I imagine, that you're surrounded with beautiful models all the time and they try on your stuff and they're really attracted to you because you came up with all of that? Is it like that, or is it like not as?
The company that I worked for was Old Navy, which is part of the Gap Inc. family of companies. And Old Navy is like the Gap in the fact that it's very family oriented. So we weren't Versace, we weren't, Ralph Lauren, where we're working with high fashion models.
Okay.
So I was in charge of graphic apparel, so all of the t-shirt business. And at the time, the t-shirt business at Old Navy was a $700 million a year business, just selling graphic t-shirts. I also saw packaging and color and trend for the brand. And the one thing that is similar to probably what you have in mind is we used to travel the world. Every quarter, we used to fly to Paris and Milan and Tokyo and Berlin and shop for, competitive research. And that was a lot of fun. That's where I learned to do trend and recognize trend. And then we would go back to our studios in New York and we would develop the quarterly collection and then have that produced. And that would go into the stores and we'd move on to the next season. So it was a cycle of getting inspiration and developing quarterly collections and putting them out in the market. So you were only as good as your last collection, and it was a constant product development cycle. It was a lot of fun. And Old Navy was an amazing rocket ship of a company to be on. We reached $1 billion in sales in less than 5 years. We were actually one of the most successful retail companies in history. But most of that was due to the fact that the Gap owned us. And so we had all that infrastructure set up already in place. But Old Navy grew like it was incredibly fast. And so I was in that from the beginning. And it was really amazing experience.
I understand the point about the infrastructures. Of course, like if you have processes and money behind it and offices and people who could work on stuff. I'm interested in the branding aspect and branding and design aspect. So what, like from a branding and design standpoint, what made this company so successful?
Well, for one thing, they adopted a very specific and memorable advertising style. For one thing, so they had this very quirky television advertising, which was very retro. It was kind of retro Americana. And their store, the retail experience was super fun. Their mannequins were kind of more cartoony than realistic. They had themed stores, so there were like these old vintage trucks in the store and wood crates, and so the retail experience was awesome. The other thing about it that was great was that the fashion that we were selling was very on trend. It was kind of like Gap, but fast fashion. It was kind of in between H&M and the Gap. It was kind of American staples, but done in a very trendy way, but also really, really affordable, much more affordable than even the Gap. So all of those things combined really created, I think, that success factor. It was a memorable name. Old Navy is kind of a memorable name. We also promoted ourselves heavily on television, radio, and because our graphic apparel business was so strong, we also did a ton of what we called, we called them generic T-shirts, where basically they were branded Old Navy. So we had hundreds and hundreds of designs with Old Navy on the chest. And so what that does is it creates a walking gallery of advertising as people are walking around with your logo or your artwork that says Old Navy on the chest. And so people learn about it and recognize it and remember it much, much faster. And in branding and design, I talk about the 3 R's a lot. The 3 R's are being recognized, being remembered, and being revered. And so in order to be recognized, you have to be visible and you have to show up a lot. And if you show up a lot and consistently enough, then you're remembered. And then if you deliver a great product or service experience, you develop that brand affinity and you're revered by your customers. So I think that the right out of the gate, the fact that they had that infrastructure of Gap, they had the physical retail, real estate aspect where they could get and build large stores very quickly. And then they also had that knowledge around branding that had made the Gap and Banana Republic very famous, and they just applied it to this new brand.
These are so interesting names, Banana Republic and Old Navy. Like, do you feel like names are really important, or because some people just use their last name? You have companies like Google or Alphabet or Facebook that don't sound, or Apple, for example, that they don't sound like very sophisticated names, but maybe I'm wrong. What do you think about the whole naming?
I think naming is very important. You have to have a memorable name. I think during the explosion of the tech industry, before the bubble exploded, I think that the whole Google nonsense name phenomenon kind of reached its zenith and then kind of blew up. But I think that having a memorable name is very important. Old Navy was actually our CEO, Mickey Drexler, was traveling in Paris and he saw a very old, dilapidated, painted billboard from the 20s or 30s that said Old Navy on it. And he just remembered that name and he named the company Old Navy. The Gap is a reference to the generation gap. which was, a saying in the late 60s, early 70s. And so that had a story to it. Old Navy has a story to it. Banana Republic started off as a very safari themed retail experience. It evolved into something that was, very high end and more kind of formal workwear. But that name started off as being very descriptive of what the retail experience was when you went to the store, because there were these, there were jungle themes and toucans and old Jeeps and stuff. I mean, it was a completely different retail experience than it is now, but the name aligned to it, and it was also really memorable. And so naming is very important when it comes to branding, because you do want to have that memorable aspect to it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, speaking for myself, I own like Digistore. I founded Digistore 24. I had started with DG Bank 24 because it was like because of ClickBank, because it was the business model that we would like to build and modify to our needs in Europe back then. Of course, we weren't able to keep that name, DG Bank, and I'm happy that we didn't keep that name, because it's like, it's kind of wrong, because we're actually a store. We're actually a shopping infrastructure for people who sell and people who market products. So so we came up with the name DG Store 24. How do you like that one? And do you think it's appropriate, or would you change that name, or what do you think about that?
Well, in order to make a recommendation around whether you change your name, it would have to be a lot more kind of work than talking about it on a podcast.
Yes, of course. I mean, just like, in a
I think
nutshell,
changing the name from Digibank was smart, because Digibank was very kind of Me Too. It was Me Too in terms of kind of following ClickBank, and then you could have name recognition problems. The other thing about it is, because Digistore 24 is so tightly integrated with CoChannel, is that Digistore not only services people who are affiliates, allowing them to make money through affiliate sales, but it also allows people who are the producers of the products and services and have their own businesses on CoChannel and other places to sell and make available what it is that they do to that affiliate network. So it's not only servicing the affiliate people, but it's also servicing the product and service companies that are developing and producing stuff out into the world. So I think that name fits that marriage. The other part of it I think that works is the 24 aspect, which is that this thing is evergreen and it generates revenue on 24/7 while making money while you sleep, as they say.
Yeah.
So I think that makes sense.
Okay, that's cool, because like, there was a long time where I thought, okay, this 24 thing is not as cool as, for example, just naming it Digistore.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, but a few years later, so I tried to buy that domain and whatever, never worked. But after a few years, and especially when I started working with Ryan, he was like, "Oh, the 24 thing, that's the best thing. Like, we need to have all kinds of 24 brands, Club 24, and like, for example, with CoChannel, he was like, "Oh, where's the 24? Like, CoChannel alone, this sucks. Like, where's the 24? Like, where?" Now I was like, okay, I thought the 24 was kind of a liability, because we didn't get digistore.com, but now it's a cool thing. Are you saying that? Yeah. Like, so for the US market, we're actually planning CoChannel 24, because he loves the 24 so much. So so yeah, and I also felt like on a later stage, okay, having Digistore 24 versus Digistore, it's a little bit more individualized. Like, it's a bit, otherwise then it's a little bit more specific. So by now, I feel like the 24 thing in the name is a good thing, actually.
Well, and it also rhymes, so it has some alliteration to it. So it has a nice ring to it. Digistore 24. Anything that has that kind of music to the sound of it makes it easy to remember, or easier to remember. Makes it also a little less generic.
Oh, Thanks for that feedback. That's interesting. And I also thought about creating some fashion around it, some fashion merchandise around it. Do you think? But I was never able to determine does it really make sense, or how do I decide that? Yeah, because of course it's a cool idea. Hey, you have a cool company. It's a software company. It's a software as a service company for people, for online marketers, for people who sell stuff online. However, it's a software as a service. It's not really, you cannot touch it like a beautiful watch or a beautiful car or Old Navy or Banana Republic, where you can showcase a nice piece of fashion or t-shirt or whatever, or car or jewelry or anything physical. So everything is just a concept. It's just very concepty. So I thought about, hey, maybe we create like this merchandise brand and even sell merchandise. What do you think about that? And how would you approach it in order to make a decision? Because of course it's a huge project.
Well, and I know that developing culture in any tech company is important. And I know in your company, Sven, you put a lot of energy and time and passion into developing your culture. You've done so in the EU. And now as you expand to the United States, you want to kind of make sure that culture translates over to the US market. And one of the things that merch essentially does for people is it helps establish a level of devotion to the brand, and both from the employee side as well as the user side. And I think what most companies really like to do or strive to do is create a bit of a cult following, a real tribe around what it is that they offer. And any kind of merchandise that would tell that story, whether it's a graphic t-shirt that has some sort of a saying on it that makes sense for your brand. Maybe it's not the Digistore 24 logo giant on the chest. Maybe it's just a small little tag on the back that identifies the shirt as coming from Digistore 24. But the message or the style or whatever it is that is that little bit of merch, maybe it's a corporate mission saying or some sort of a catchphrase or something that you want to publicize that can help people feel part of that tribe or is telling their story in terms of making them feel part of that of your mission, whether they're a customer of Digistore 24 or a customer of CoChannel, or whether they're an internal employee. That's the kind of spirit that you want to engender. And there's obviously lots of different ways you can do that, from a podcast to apparel or to events, physical events or physical conferences, contests, all sorts of different ways of kind of engaging your internal and external community so they can feel more passionately engaged with your brand as a friend and as a trusted partner, essentially.
I see. So you're basically saying, yes, it's a good idea and it helps to build the brand and it helps to build the tribe and it helps to build the following. My thought here is, okay, I totally agree, but then I want like really good looking stuff. So if I make something, it shouldn't be just like a cheap t-shirt from Southeast Asia and just a logo thrown on it somewhere and that's it. So I want it to be a little bit more designed and really nice looking, etc., etc. We have created mugs and t-shirts. So the US part of the company already started that, and there was quite some demand. Like I got a lot of messages through Instagram, like, "Hey, can I have that merch too?" and stuff. So I had some sent to some people, which is pretty interesting. And I thought, okay, then if we do that, we have to really create a high quality product, something that really represents our effort, our like what we also do in software and company culture, everything we touch, basically, we want to have in a very high quality. So yeah, I agree that this is cool. In the following episode of Svencast, I also can openly say that I bought a Tesla because I like Elon Musk. I just wanted to try like the whole experience.
you have to make a determination of how much the personal brand serves the business brand. Is the personal brand an offshoot of the company, or is the personal brand a driver of the company? And you could say that Elon Musk, definitely Richard Branson, or Steve Jobs, those guys' personalities are drivers of the company.
If you like this episode, please make sure to check out Philip's YouTube channel and his website. You'll find the links in the description below, and make sure to tune in to Svencast next time.